Hello, good afternoon or good morning, depending of where in the world you're watching. My name is Andrea. I'm working from iSQI, ISKI. So I'm just coming here today to do a very brief introduction because we have a very special guest. Today we have joining us Jennifer Smith with the topic of fundamental of user design. Let me just put her in the screen. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jennifer.
Absolutely. No problem. Loving it.
Just to give you a little bit of idea, I'm not going to be taking too much of your time. You have a great presentation coming up for us. So for those that don't know already, Ms. Smith, Jennifer is a user experience designer, educator, and author based in Boston. She has been awarded a Microsoft MVP award 3 times for her work in the field of user experience design, assisting with creating apps for touch, desktop, mobile devices. Jennifer holds the CPUX Foundation level credentials from the UXQB and leads the CPUX Foundation level exam preparation courses for the American Graphic Institute. So I'm not going to take too much of your time, and I'm going to pass this on to Jennifer so she can proceed to also do what is the presentation and not take too much of her time as well.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to just jump in, and you already have my background. I want this to be very casual, very high level, hopefully informative for you guys. But I'm going to talk about UX design principles from a high level. But I also want to incorporate some of the information that comes from the certification exam, the UXQB exam, and things that you might need to know if you're thinking of getting yourself certified, because a lot of people work in UX design, and you might come from the visual portion, you might come from the research side, but in order to become certified, you kind of have to know about the whole process. And so I thought I'd take my normal high-level UX design principles class and build it and incorporate it with some of the things that you might need to know, so that it might give you a jump start if you're thinking about going down that path and becoming certified in UX, actually human-centered design processes. So this is a high-level introduction. I am going to follow the human-centered design process as defined by the International Usability and Experience Qualification Board, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I want you to more get an idea of what user experience is and the effect it can have on your business. And so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just jump in, and I want to talk about what UX is. User experience. It refers to any interaction a user has with a product or service. This could be anything from how a product feels in their hands to, how easily they can buy something online. The object is to create an easy and all-around pleasant experience. So by building something successfully that actually helps a user reach their goal, that's how you create a successful experience. So experiences that might prevent you from reaching goals, maybe going to a website that requires you to log in order to see their products, getting stuck in checkout. Maybe they don't accept the payment type of content that you want. Like maybe I want to use Apple Pay or PayPal and it doesn't take it, so I don't buy the product. Not being able to find what I want on a site. Those are also experiences, maybe not necessarily good, but they're part of UX. So this is all part of what we call the human-centered design process. And why is it important? Because good design equals a better experience. And this is why user experience has become really important to many corporations nowadays, because they recognize that if they improve their experience, whether it be on a website or an application, that they can actually financially gain more from that as well. That's why UX designers are in demand. Really good UX designers can make an organization a lot of money. So if you know what you're doing, you can change things so that more people will buy from the application or the website. They'll come to the website. They'll come back and return at the website. You'll have less people leaving their items in the cart and actually going through and processing that sale. So making a lot more money from creating a better experience and helping people to reach their goals. This is even important in what I might call a productivity app. Like, let's say that you're making reservations for an airline, or you're making, taking hotel reservations, whatever it is. It might be a system that the actual user's not seeing, but you're the user. So if you're using a productivity app and you're going through the process and you're trying to get a transaction through, if it's built well, you'll remember what you're doing and you'll be able to do it the second time more easily. You can do all your tasks more easily. You make less mistakes. You're more confident when you do this. What this means is that if you have something that has a great user experience, somebody will be able to do their job faster. And not only faster, they'll make less errors. And because of that, they're calling the help desk less, and there's less documentation. And hopefully that means that development can be done a little bit faster too. So all in all, it's a win all over the place if you consider how you design your application, your website, whatever interactive document that you're creating. So other values of good UX design, it does constantly communicate with your customer. If you have something that's viewed on a website or an application, it brings order and clarity to information, making it easy for them to find things. It impacts their decision in a fraction of a second, helps them stand out from others, and that also makes you look more trustworthy. So companies that understand UX design financially benefit in a multitude of ways. And so I just show a couple examples here, but when you think of great design, typically, one of the companies you might think about is Apple, because they design their websites well, but they design their products well. They design their applications well. They even design that box you get your phone in extremely well. And if I were to ask you guys to raise your hands for everyone who has an Apple phone, who has also kept their box, probably 90% of you, because you just love the way that it opens. It's got that little vacuum sound. It's just a beautiful design and a piece. But that is an experience. And they're thinking about that in everything that they do. And so one thing that I try to do with everyone that I work with in design, is get them to understand that this interaction, this design, user experience, it's not only about a website or an application. You really have to integrate it in everything that you do. And a lot of people laugh about this, but that means if you have a really messy desk, maybe organize it and make it a little bit neater. If you've got stuff stuck on the wall over the place, maybe make it look more clean, align it to a grid. But it should be in you that you always want to present things in a really well-designed view. And that means if you're submitting something to your boss and it's in Word, maybe exaggerate your headlines a little bit, just to have a different text size differentiation. Oh boy, can't even say that. But differentiate your text sizes to make it look more well-designed, but also make it easier for them to read and pull out the important points. So let it affect everything that you do. So of course, I was talking about Apple. There's their website, but also if you were to go to YouTube and look for somebody opening their iPhone box, which is just kind of crazy, this is stuff that people will record, and they'll get millions of people watching them open an iPhone box. So ultimately, that's a real success in user experience. That's when you understand that this experience they've taken all the way down to that level of when somebody brings their product home. And if you think of Tiffany, with the little teal box, kind of the same type of experience. Google as well. Go back to that. Also really big in creating experiences. I do have some friends at Google. They are really good about keeping things simple, keeping distractions away from people, providing people with what they ask for, and not cluttering up their UI with a bunch of other things that are not important. So what do successful experiences have in common? They are simple, and we're going to talk about this. how do you keep something simple? I mean, that's really what's most important. And in a lot of cases, this is done by you really, truly understanding what people's needs are. So the buttons, pictures, and words focus on the needs of the user. There is something that this is a statement I absolutely love, and it would be good for you to pick up as well. Fierce reduction of unnecessary elements, like taking a step back, and as you're designing something, whether it be a poster, printed poster, or a website, or an application, saying, do I really need that gradient behind there? Do I really need rules all over the place? Do I really need this triangle in the middle of this graphic or whatever? But if it doesn't serve a purpose, get rid of it. That's part of fierce reduction of unnecessary elements. And then also keeping things neat and tidy. So how do you make something simple? You allow the needs of the user to drive what appears on your screens. And so we'll talk about this in a little bit, because in order to do this, you really have to understand your user. You really have to do an analysis of what the user wants. I started in visual design. I moved into UX design about 15 years ago. And I think that was one of the really big light bulbs that went off in my mind was it's not just visual design. It's called design, but it's not what it looks like. What UX design is, it's information design. It's what words you use on the screen. It's how big you make them and where you place them. And that's all based upon what you found out your user needs and how you can help them. You develop how you can help them reach their goals. So it's not always the visual design. It's that information design married with visual design. And so keeping it simple, again, allowing only those items that are important to appear in the screen. If something's not needed, get rid of it. Keeping it simple comes more easily if you understand and use the human-centered design process, which we'll talk about briefly. So I like to show this example because if you go to Google, you might not see anything. You might see the last few web pages you went to or whatever. But if you understand Google, they make a lot of money off search. And our company itself, I know we pay to appear when people search for different terms. And we pay Google a fair amount of money in order to do that. So they don't want you to go to Google planning on searching and then get distracted. Now, let me show you kind of an alternate view using something called Yahoo. If I go to Yahoo and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go search for Photoshop training or whatever it might be, I might come in here and then I look and I'm like, oh, no, Serval Puppy, Cruise Defense Speech or whatever, or Goslin was working at TGI Fridays. You guys might not recognize all these people, but nonetheless, you find something interesting, you click on it, you go to read an article, and then you realize that you're behind in a project that you have to do, and you never search. So this is ultimately what distractions look like. And this is what can happen if you're not really focused on the user and you don't really understand your user and what their needs are. So focusing on the needs of the user, I'm going to show you an example. Now, this is in the US. This is BWI, Baltimore Washington Airport. This is their website prior to really thinking about what the goals are of a user. And if you look at this, it's kind of distracting, right? Like it's got the arrivals and departures for every flight. Now, you think about it, who really goes to an airport website just to find every single flight that's coming in or leaving? I mean, maybe if you're retired and you're really bored, you might do that, but ultimately that's probably not their primary user. So they have a lot of information on here, a lot of distractions. So they did some studies and they went out and discovered what their users were looking for. And you can tell when a website has been built on scenarios or has some research behind it because of the way it's presented. And if you look at this now, it has tabs that say things like, I'm planning a trip. I'm flying from BWI. I'm arriving at BWI. I'm picking someone up. So these were the main things that they discovered people were looking for on the website. And then they adjusted and built the structure of the website to help them reach their goals, which was finding out what they need when they're planning a trip or when they're picking somebody up or whatever. So this is the website after it was fixed. This is their mobile app. So for the desktop version, they have more information. When you go mobile, they asked people who were using phones, like, hey, when you're on your phone, what are you looking for when you go to the BWI site? And they're like, oh, flight status and parking availability. So I can still access all the information by going up to the menu. So I can still find the full information that's on the desktop, but they recognize that most people who were using the phone wanted to reach the goal of finding the flight status of a particular flight or finding out what the parking situation was. So you can totally see that this was built upon user needs, which makes it more successful, more easy for people to use, and ultimately, it's going to be something that they're going to use more often. So other considerations, don't worry about everything being pretty. Like, I see a lot of portfolios and such of visual designers who make things look very beautiful, but are not successful because they don't think about the words that they're using or the structure or where they're putting things on the screen. So one of the top usable websites is not very pretty. I was going to say ugly, but that's not a nice word. But Wikipedia, it's not beautiful, but it's really used a lot. And that's because people go to it and they want to find the information, they can find it, and they get out. I mean, I go there every time I want to find a celebrity's age. I go to Wikipedia, I find the age, and I'm gone. So it doesn't have to necessarily be gorgeous, but it does have to answer their needs. Directs the user, makes complex tasks more manageable. So if you're doing something that is complicated, you need to break it down into steps to make it more easy for people to understand. You might have things in here like they have at the bottom of the screen, how it works, see what other people pay, real pricing on actual cars, get competitive pricing. You might have to digest things down into simple, really easy steps for people in order to make it easy for them to follow a process. Introduces fun and delightfulness. This doesn't mean every website or application you create should have a game in it, but it might be a different way of thinking. And so, like, for instance, if you went to Poppin's website, they sell office supply furniture and supplies, but let's say that I decide I want everything in red. Okay, lots of office supply companies are out there. They have that information in their metadata. They know that they're selling a cabinet that's red, or a stapler that's red, or a pen that's red. But this company actually just added that metadata, they bubbled it up to the top so that somebody can click on red and they can see every product that's in red. So just a different fun way to introduce information that you have. But if I am looking for, a bunch of office supplies and I happen to want them to be teal, this is an easy way to find them. Whereas if I went to a regular office supply organization, it might take me like an hour to find them all. So other things too, that social aspect is important. And this is data that you have as well. So let's say that you're building a website or a productivity app or enterprise app, whatever you want to call it, where somebody has to log in. Once I log in, you already know my name. So why not add a little social aspect to it? Why not say, good morning, Jennifer, or good afternoon? It can recognize your system. It can recognize my name. And actually what's been discovered is that if you include your name or the user's name in a login, that they're actually better about filling in the information accurately because they're like, oh my gosh, they know who I am. So I better be really accurate with my information. But also you'll see some social aspect over here on the right. This happens to be a product called Optimal Workshop, which is great for UX design if you're doing card sorting and reverse card sorting and interviewing. I believe they're based out of Australia, but you'll notice that they incorporate that social aspect in here as well, where I can see customer service photos of people I'm speaking with. I can follow the conversations. So again, a social aspect that makes it much more enjoyable. Don't forget, you have to consider branding. These are, marketing requirements or whatever they might be. I just have, if you haven't heard of Neil Norman Group, you should check them out. They have a lot of free information about usability, user experience there. I just threw this one slide up as an example, but it basically is saying, hey, when you're building a website, put your logo up in the upper left because that's where most people are expecting it. So don't do some crazy stuff and put it at the bottom just because you think it looks cool. Do something that people are used to. And you can see I just showed Adobe's website and where their logo is placed up in the upper left. Other things, consider the platforms. This is something that you really have to think about. When you're building something, you have to understand that it will 9 times out of 10 be touched. You're not just building things for desktop anymore because desktop applications might come down if they're responsive and be produced on a phone or an iPad, or like I have a touch device, Windows device, where I'm doing kind of a little bit of touching and using my mouse and using my computer, the keyboard itself. So like you don't really know how people are going to interact with whatever you create. So you want to make sure that you construct information to be easily accessible, chunky, lots of space, make sure everything has a simple gesture for it, large controls, more space between controls, provide feedback, and allow for scrolling. And just so you know, people love to scroll, and they will scroll if you do something called peek, where you cut off some of the information so they know that more is below, or maybe put an arrow or some other kind of indicator that there's more information. So good or bad, design is everywhere. So I'm going to talk about context of use a little bit here, like understanding what your users really want to do, because that's part of the first stage of creating a great user experience, is really understanding how your users need to use the product. But I like to just show, like great funny examples of poor context of use. Like this picture goes up on a car, but yet nobody thought of how it might look if somebody's winding down the window. And you see tons of these, like on buses and all sorts of crazy things, these wraps where they haven't considered that experience. But also just road systems, like where are most people going? Should we promote one of these or the rest less important? This is really confusing. And, when you're traveling is when you discover a lot of poor experiences. And in a lot of cases, it's really easy to do because of signage that's kind of consistent in its look, so it makes it easy for you to find what you're looking for. But in other cases, it's very confusing and very distracting. This is actually an airline that I was working with where you can't really see the keyboard down in the lower right-hand corner, but it had a bunch of numbers and codes in it. And so the person I was working with was typing in all these codes in order to get something changing my reservation. It was taking 10, 15 minutes. That obviously is a poor design. It's not intuitive. It's not easy. And you think about it, this airline organization, if they have 10,000 people working in customer service trying to do this at the same time, the amount of money that they could save by streamlining the process so that these people could instead be making sales or helping other people make reservations would be, of course, much improved. So elevators are a great source of poor user experience. This one based upon spacing, you have no idea. Do I press the left button to go down or do I press the upper right button? And so after looking at this, I did some research on elevators and I found that they are just generally really confusing to people, and that there is even a large portion of people who feel like they need to tell the elevator what to do. So in other words, if I'm on the first floor and the elevator's on the 9th floor, then I need to press down to get the elevator down to me. And then I get on and then I tell it I'm going up. And I would have never believed this, but I started noticing it. And if you ever get to the point where you can visit a hotel again, like right now, that's off limits for me. But, watch and you'll see that people actually do this. Point being, you're not the user. And so I might find it stunning that people do this, but I should never design something with myself in mind. I need to talk to users because they will sometimes surprise you. And so if you're designing in a bubble without doing any analysis of who your users are and what their goals are, then you're not going to be very successful in what you create. So these I love because you see these all the time. They've got handles, so you have to pull, but they say push, but you walk up and you pull them and you feel like the bird that hits the glass because nothing happens. And then you see push. So again, these are user experiences that you encounter all the time that have perhaps nothing to do with a website or an application, but still, nonetheless, they're user experiences. This is actually San Francisco, if you want to buy a subway ticket. And we talked about distractions and how you should make it easy for people to find where they're going. It's kind of like wayfinding when you're using, any interactive device. And so in this case, you've got a lot of distractions, audio, keypad, ... and then a lot on the screen. And the screen doesn't really have anything prioritized or any hierarchy of information, making it easy for you to find things. If you've ever gone to San Francisco, in California, in the US, you might see lines of 20 people trying to buy tickets at this ticket kiosk because it is so confusing. So by simplifying things, you can make it easier for people, again, to reach their goals, get them in, get them out, get them on the train and on their way. And then you might walk into your doctor's office and see something like this, which, of course, totally unusable, poor design, pretty obvious what the error is here. And this is a poster that I kind of copied because I just found it so fascinating because it is so true. You could design something one way, and then people decide that they don't want to use it that way, and they'll find their own way to use it. So ultimately, what is UX, user experience? It's the user's perception and responses that result from the use of anticipated use of an interactive system. And I'm going to use a product. You guys haven't used Vivino yet. It might be pronounced Vivino. I don't know. I'm in the US, so I downloaded this app, but it helps you to choose wine. Okay. And here's how it works. User experience, just think of this from a high level. It affects expectation, satisfaction, fulfillment of expectations. And so that includes anticipated use before you use the product. That includes the actual use of you using the product. And it also includes after use. So user experience includes all of that, not just the fact that they're using the product. And so let me explain using this as an example. Let me come back into here. So I go in and I'm maybe going here, I might go to a wine store. And because I know I have Vivino, I'm not worried. I haven't done a lot of research on the wines that I want. I haven't studied or looked online. I haven't spent any time whatsoever because I know that I can walk in with this app and I can take a picture of a wine bottle and I can get the ratings and what it should cost instantly. So that's the prior to use. That's the before use. It's a great experience. It saves me a lot of time. I go in and I take a picture of a bottle of wine. I get the response. There are no usability issues while I'm using it. So that's also good experience. It doesn't lock up on me or cause any errors. So I end up buying the wine. And then after the experience, a couple things happen here. One is I get an email giving me more information about the wine that I scanned. Or it might be the experience of having picked a really great bottle of wine. And so I have a really great time. And this is a pre-COVID picture, of course, because now we wouldn't hang out like this and drink wine. But normally, you'd have a get together. People would comment, wow, this wine's really good. And so the whole experience of that product is successful. So what is the human-centered design process? That includes that whole experience. And so I'm using human-centered as an example, just in case any of you guys are interested in following up and doing more, discovering more about the UXQB and the User Experience Qualification Board test or certification exam. So it is an approach to design that aims to make interactive systems, which could be an ATM, could be a website, could be an application, could be a coffee maker, anything really, more usable by focusing on the use of an interactive system, applying usability knowledge and methods. In order to complete this process, you must understand the user's goals, tasks, resources, and environments. And I explain that to you, and hopefully you got that in that first section, is that you really can't build something unless you understand user needs first. This can all be done in a fast iterative process known as Lean UX. Lean UX supports agile development. Now, I don't have enough time to go into all of that, but what I thought I'd do is kind of break things out based upon the process that is stressed with the UXQB certification exam. Basically, there's a standard that has been set up, an ISO standard 9241, where a process has been created. And I found that as a UX designer, it helped me to recognize this process as a standard process to follow if you are a UX designer. And so what I've done is I've made a sample, like we'll work on a food truck app, and I'll just take you through this to hopefully make it make more sense. So as I said, I'm going to use food truck as an example, and I want to talk about the first stage of this, planning the human-centered design process. This basically means that you come up with a plan. And so a lot of you who maybe are already in UX design might even do many of the things that are specified here, but you might not follow the exact same path, or you might call them something different. So I'll take you through this quickly, but my plan might include a description of the product, its objectives, what the deliverables are, the timeline, the cost estimate. So if I'm creating this, I might come up with something for my food truck example where I'm saying, I'm going to create this app. It's going to be best in its category at locating top-rated food trucks and informing the user when they're nearby, maybe sharing comments with friends. The objective, create a mobile and desktop app. It's a really good idea to have a plan, because I have worked with organizations who have not had a plan. And then all of a sudden, halfway through, they're like, oh, we're building a mobile app? Like people are surprised. Like just getting those expectations clear up front is always helpful. Plan deliverables, what I have to do, interviews I have to do, figure out the user needs, prototypes that I'm going to create, all of this in that initial plan, the timeline, and then the cost estimate. So obviously, this is a good idea to come up with this initially. Next, this is when you analyze your user. You understand and specify what's called the context of use, how people will use the product. And in order to do that, you might have to interview people. You might have to develop personas in order to help you remember these people and what their needs are throughout the whole entire process. So when you interview users, you consider questions that are not directly related to your site or app. And I'll give you some examples here, again, relating this to the food truck. But it helps you to discover the goals of the user. And in many cases, like I said, there might not be a resource for them at this point. And to give you an example, we worked with a medical insurance company here in the US, and we went out and asked people to take us through the process that they go through in order to submit health claims. And there were people calling on phones. There were people who were still faxing with fax machines. It was kind of a mess. There were people doing this using processes that were all very different, but that helped us to recognize what the need was. And in the end, what was created was something where this organization had one page somebody could go to. They had a representative with their picture there. They had a progress bar recognizing where their claim was and how much time was remaining. but that came from watching people do something that was unrelated to their product because their product did not exist at that time. So you have, and if you're in this industry, you'd like to talk to people, you'd like to have open discussions to try to help discover what their needs ultimately are. So food truck questions, like if I were doing this and interviewing people, I might ask people like, oh, how long is your lunch break? Like this has nothing to do with an app, but what it helps me do is discover that if most people only have 30 minutes or an hour, that if they're using this app, they need to find trucks within a certain area. How far would you walk for good food? How do you find places to eat lunch now? How long would you wait for food? How do you remember your favorite trucks? Now, you don't want closed sentences or questions. You don't want to ask them questions where they're just saying, yes, I'd like to eat at food trucks, or yes, I only have 30 minutes for lunch. You want them to expand on those answers so that you can start creating in your mind a solution that's going to help these people. So again, open them up, have a good open discussion, and it's amazing what you'll find. So you'll find out how users are reaching their goals now, and that's called an as-is scenario. Like, how are they doing it now? And as I mentioned, your solution might not exist. You also might recognize different user groups at this point. So I might recognize that the owner of the truck also needs some support here. So maybe our app has a way in for the user, like the customer who's buying the food, but also the owner or the manager of the food truck has a different use for it. And maybe they're going up and posting the menus, or they're looking at graphs that are showing them, sales, or when the peak moments are when they're, selling lunch, whatever it may be. But those are called user groups, when you basically have different types of people who are very similar to each other using your product. So from this, I might create a persona. And of course, that communicates important information without writing technical specifications. And so I might come up with a really simple one. And this is an easy one. But Frank, he's a police officer with over 30 years. We like to throw pictures in because pictures make it part of the story. Frank is walking his beat in the park and is hungry for his favorite Mexican food. Frank hasn't worked out in years and gets winded easily, so he's a little out of shape. But he wishes that there was an easy way to find a truck nearby at a short wait time. So you build these personas from perhaps people even that you spoke to in your interviews. I'm doing a quick introduction of other things as well. A journey map. A journey map might be done at this time too. And basically, this is a really simple one here where we just took Post-its. And as somebody was going through the process of purchasing a dress online, if it was a positive moment and a positive step, we would just, we had a clipboard at the time, go up, 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 like everything's good. And then if they hit an error, or maybe they didn't find the size that they want or the brand that they want, that was a down. And then we might write, like put a red dot and say, this is what happened at this point. Like, oh, we had a password error, or they were out of stock, or whatever it may be. But basically, a journey map is just touch points that somebody actually goes through as they're going through a process. And so this might be something else that you do at this point too. And the example that is used in the UXQB exam is more built like a matrix. So it might look like, on the left is the task. Somebody's looking for a local food truck, and they use a map to find a truck near him or her, whatever it is. But it has the tasks they're going through, and then what the touch point is, what they're doing. But this helps you to understand the process that somebody goes through. And some people really take this to the next level, which is great. So Lucidchart, if you haven't used that website yet, really helpful. They have templates to do this, where you might elaborate on this journey map, and you might even have more information like quotes or things that people have said, but it's still following that process where if it's a positive experience, you're going up, 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 and then something bad happens, it goes down. It's a visual to show you the process that somebody goes through. So from this, you're also going to discover your goals. And so from talking to people, I might find out that they're looking for a quick bite to eat from a nearby food truck, or they want to investigate different types of food trucks, or they're interested in finding food trucks that have been recommended by others. I'm building and prioritizing the user needs that I discovered by interviewing people. They want to find healthy food truck options. They want to find trucks within their budget. They want to always know where their favorite trucks are all the time. And in fact, I might even change the order of these. In fact, I typically do. And I list the number one goal at the top, and then I move down the line, because whatever the number one goal is what I visually have to promote on the very first screens. You know, I have to make it easy for somebody to look for a quick bite from a nearby food truck. So you start to think about UI as you're doing this, and you're like, wow, that would be great if I had a map on the first screen with the little trucks that are moving, and it shows where they are and when the trucks are. But all of that came from me talking to people, and it can visualize, or you can visualize it and turn it into a really successful experience by doing that. So I talked about context of use. Like, that is understanding how people are using your, or going to use your app or website. And so you might break this down into a matrix, like my users, people who work downtown, their goal is to get lunch quickly, the task, locate a truck nearby, no line, the social environment, supervisors, physical environment, office, resource, phone, or desktop. But this is an example of context of use, really understanding how people are going to use the product. So from that, and if you notice, that was our goal, to reach the context of use. The next step is to specify the user requirements. What are the user needs and what are the requirements? And so just kind of going through this quickly, I might break this down and actually determine a real user need. And so I'm using a formula in order to do this. What I'm saying, when taking a 1-hour lunch break, that's the context of use. An office worker, who's the user, needs to know how far away a truck is and if there is a line. It's a prerequisite in order to buy lunch and be back in time. The goal. So I'm breaking this down into kind of almost like a pattern, which I can understand to help me to build the product. I might also have discovered requirements at this time. And a requirement is basically a capability that must be possible in the interactive system. But you'll start to understand, if you haven't already, that there are market requirements. Like, that might be your marketing you and say, it has to have, you know, the red color or corporate red color. That's a market requirement. You might have organizational requirements that you have to think about. Charges over 100 are not allowed without having a user account. You might have the user requirements. Users must be able to tell which trucks are closest. And then you also might have qualitative and quantitative requirements. So there are, at this stage, you're collecting all the user needs and all the requirements. You're still not visualizing this. And so I know that coming from the visual design background, and I know it's horrible to say, but 15 years ago, if somebody came to me and asked me to make a website, a lot of times I would jump into Photoshop, which is horrible for creating websites in. Hopefully, if you are a visual designer, you're using either Sketch or XD at this point. But I immediately went into visual design. And what I want you to recognize in this process that we're talking about is there's a lot that leads up to visual design. You really need to understand what needs to go on the screen. That is so much more important than what it looks like. So here's the fun part. If you're in visual design, like, you know, my background, this is when we get into doing produce the design solutions. And this is when you build the scenarios of how people are going to use your application or website. You might come up with storyboards, task models. The tasks are the steps that they go through in order to reach their goal. You might come up with the information architecture. That's the navigation, style guides, wireframes. My favorite part is the prototyping, low fidelity and high fidelity. So just quickly going through this, all of this is iterative. All of this you can go back and redo if it's not working out. So you start with early design and you convert user needs into user requirements and user requirements into use scenarios. If you remember, as is scenarios were how they were doing it prior to our application or website. The use scenarios are how we expect them to use our application or website. Storyboards, user journey maps, first sketches, you're doing wireframes, low fidelity prototypes, information architecture, then you refine them. So you might go into Sketch or XD and create really high fidelity working prototypes. You might create a style guide, which we'll talk about. And then if it doesn't work, you can still repeat within that process and even go back to prior processes. You're constantly iterating. That's why it's so important that you start with sketches and low fidelity prototypes, because you don't want to waste a lot of time doing a refined design to find out that it doesn't work. So first of all, you got to define those use scenarios. And that's basically a narrative text description that describes an intended use situation. So an example would be, before leaving for the office, Frank checks to see what food trucks with the shortest wait line are closest to him. He's relieved to see that he can use his food truck app to pre-order his lunch from a nearby Mexican food truck and pick it up in time for his afternoon meeting. Some of you might do this now. You might call these personas. You might call this a story. You might, there's lots of different terms that people use. As long as you're in there and you're really recognizing a real true situation as to how somebody might use your product. Other things that you might do. Card sorting is a lot of fun. And if you notice these cards on the left, I have like different tasks. You might have products. Like if you have a ton of products and you're not sure how to categorize them, you might put a product on a different card. And then on the back, you number these cards. So in my case, I wasn't quite sure what my navigation was going to look like. I needed some help with terminology. So I put tasks down, and then if you flip them over, you can see different numbers. And then you give those cards in a pile to somebody, and you say, I don't care how you organize these, put them into logical groupings that make sense to you, and then take these Post-its and you name what you think that group should be called. And so by doing this at this point, this is how I avoid using acronyms and terms that nobody else understands but me. So if you're in the medical field or even financial field, there might be words that you're tempted to use that no one else understands. But if you notice in here, somebody put these in a logical group and then they named that first column, find a truck. So I could take that, and maybe if enough people were using these same logical groupings, it might change my navigation and it might make it easier for people to find things. If you're doing it manually, it's a pain, because if you notice on the left, I would have to write down every grouping, and then I would flip the cards over and I'd say, oh, participant 1, they use search and they put 1, 2, 4, and 5 in. And participant 2 only put card 2 in, and you have to try to find something there that is consistent. I prefer actually to use online card sorting. Optimal Sort, I showed you the screen earlier, but where I can create all my cards and then somebody can just drag them out and say, oh, well, I put a cat and a kitten together, and then they can call it what they want. I'll call this feline. But the nice thing about doing online sorting is it's remote, which is important now, but also you can get results in a different way. So this is one of the methods in which you can get results. It's called a dendrogram, which is really great because you can see it shows that most people put dog, puppy, wolf, coyote into a heading called canine. So it does all the work for you as far as collecting data and finding the similarities between it all. But again, that's part of card sorting, which is part of this process. The information architecture is probably the most important part of your application or website. And this is when you decide what's going to be on your screen, what features are going to be on your screen and where, whether they're going to have to go to the third screen to complete their tasks, or if they can complete them all in the first. But it essentially helps to create a rough site map. We use Post-its in a lot of cases. We put them up all over the place. We move them around. We keep rereading our goals, making sure that if the top goal is that somebody finds a truck nearby, we actually take our fingers and we click on the Post-its and we're like, okay, they would go here, and then they would go here, and then they found it. If our top goal is somebody finding a truck nearby and they have to go here, 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 each click is representing a different screen. Each pile that you see on this screen here in front of me is representing a different screen. If it's taking too long for them to navigate, then that structure is not going to work. So you build it from the goals. You might list your features here, whatever makes it easiest for you to build your navigation. And then you test it by going back and making sure that even using something at this level, at this low fidelity, that you can see the path in which somebody's going to take to reach their goals. And then you can take this further and go into Lucidchart or Visio, whatever you want to make it look pretty. But this is a great iterative way of testing out a navigation. And so, as I said, we might then test with other people like, oh, here's your goal. How would you reach it? And watching them try to navigate. The other thing included at this stage is storyboards. Storyboards do not have to be beautiful. They're sketches. This one shows somebody going to a ticket booth, getting a ticket, scanning the QC code, and then using it to get on the train. But it shows a process in a really easy way. And then, of course, sketches. And I always tell people, do not ever start design on a computer because you cannot iterate if you spent 8 hours building something and it's not successful. In some cases, you might say, I just spent 8 hours making this, so I'm going to stick with it. Whereas if you start with a sketch, you can crush it up, throw it away, and start over again. And people actually will iterate with you more often. So basically, at this stage, building your UI with paper and pencil is going to save you ultimately more time in the long run. And I always tell people you don't have to be an artist because you're just going to put line where you want text. If you have a picture, maybe an X. It doesn't have to be beautiful. Those of you who are visual designers, you might go crazy like, but I want to put the colors in and I want to see what the pictures look like. You keep it separate at this point. You keep the sketches separate from branding and color choices and that sort of thing. And so we typically use something called a style tile where we'll go into Adobe Illustrator or Adobe XD or Sketch and we'll build a page that looks like this that just says, these are the colors we're going to use. And this is the typeface we're going to use. And these are the type of pictures. But we keep it separate because you don't want to combine them at this point, because if you're working with your stakeholders and, powers that be, whoever they are, if they look at your idea and they see orange and they absolutely hate orange, it might distract them from looking at the navigation and all the other important things that you've decided. And so you might have to change your expectations when you go to see people and talk to them. And before you show them a sketch, say, I'm doing this in a low fidelity format because we want to make sure the navigation works. This is not how it's actually going to look, so that they don't, maybe get upset about the fact that it's not visually beautiful. Something that's visually designed can sometimes trick people into thinking it's very successful because they like the way it looks, when actually the navigation isn't going to be helpful for the user. So use design tools, but we even start with prototypes, and we build paper prototypes where they might look like this, but they're really easy to work with. And you put them true to size, and you're not investing a lot of time in them, and you can narrate to somebody how a product works. You really can't hand them a pile of paper, but you can get their feedback on a product before spending a lot of time on it. And balsamic mockups, kind of one step above sketching. If you haven't used this product, it's awesome. It looks like sketches. It's all black and white, unless you don't want it black and white, but you should. But it actually builds clickable prototypes that are low fidelity, but people can test navigation with. And Axure is mentioned in the USQB exam, so I just like to mention that that particular prototyping tool does high fidelity prototypes where it actually looks like the final product. It even has the ability to incorporate some JavaScript in it, but it also has a slider in it that makes it look more sketchy if you want to take that visual design portion out. We typically use either Sketch or XD, which are very similar. XD, I think, is still free, but it builds clickable prototypes that people can test right on a device. You can share it with them, or you can even have it working on a phone, which is super cool. And it's touch, and you can get responses from people, comments as well. So here's the next step. And I just want to explain something. Deliverables, this is when you do usability tests. This is when you might plan. You have to write out a test plan for usability. You have to write out a script because you're probably going to sit with somebody and you want to make sure that you ask consistent questions and ask them maybe to perform different tasks. And then you have to recruit your test participants. And then you actually run the test where you do a little briefing, you do a pre-session interview with them, you solve the usability test tasks, and then you have a post-session interview with them. And then you report that. And so basically at this point, you're also doing something where you're evaluating the dialogue principles. These are heuristic type things that you might look at, like, oh, is it suitable for the task? Is it self-descriptive? Do people know what to do with it? Does it conform to their user expectations? Is it suitable for learning? Can they control it? Is there error tolerance in it? And is it suitable for individualization? And so you're doing this stuff as well. But what I want to get at, and we're wrapping this up pretty soon, is that all of these steps, you'll see that I have these purple arrows here. That's because if you get to this stage where you're doing the UX deliverables and things haven't worked out, it's all iterative. Like, you can go back and do some more studies and talk to more users, or you might go back and evaluate the user needs, or you might go back and fix the prototype, but it's all iterative, like this whole process. And when you're actually done, then the design solution meets the user requirements. And then you've created a successful product. So that's the process. Hopefully that helped, because that's a lot that I try to cram in this. I guess we had almost an hour, but Andrea, I think I'm done. If you want to, open this up or show some of the comments or questions at this point, I don't know if I should stop sharing.
No problem. If you want, I can keep the presentation still in the screen, actually, on seconds, and that way people can still see. Thank you so much for that. Actually, we got very good comments in the groups. I cannot show the comments and those in the screen because there are groups that have been shared. I have a lot of people actually interested in the presentation, and also they would like to know a little bit more maybe about the training as well, because I did mention in some of them a little bit. I don't know if you would like to mention some words about that.
Sure. So we do have a 2-day training class that we're based in Boston, US, but it's really for any region, where we have 2 days of prep for the class where we review a lot of these things in more details. And then on the third day, you actually take the exam. And so we're at agitraining.com, but I can just let you know the price is $9.95 US for the 2-day training program, and then it includes the testing cost within there. And if you feel that you're qualified, you can, of course, just take the test itself without the prep class as well. And that's coming up. Okay, so December 14th and 15th are the prep classes, and the 16th is the test. And the 16th, you can take just the test if you want. And that is $250 US if you feel like you're qualified and you want to just go take the test.
Thank you. Anyone that is still watching, let us know any questions. If you still have any questions, maybe also about the presentation, maybe we can keep here for a couple more minutes without taking too much of Jennifer's time now. But I did get very good compliments. A lot of people were saying hello. I also had some people, as I mentioned, they were asking for the presentation. They will be interested in seeing this later on. Just so everyone knows, this live session is being recorded as well. So if for some reason you missed the beginning and you kind of like started a little bit halfway through, you're more than welcome to also rewatch this when it gets uploaded as well. So thank you as well, everyone, for joining us, and Jennifer for this amazing presentation. Something that you mentioned, some things that were quite interesting in the points of like view, especially with the food truck example, I would say. It's quite interesting, those silly questions of like, how long is your lunch break, for example, and then that really gives you a lot of information behind maybe what your target audience is looking for. So I think it's all going back to the basics, isn't it? Asking those questions to understand the behind how their minds work. So I can see in the group someone is writing something. Let me have a look if I could have a look into those tabs. So I can see you got some comments say hello. They say thank you for the presentation. She was very pleased to do the presentation here. So I'm just reading here. You got many comments of saying thank you for sharing this information, and if we could share maybe the presentation and the link as well to the site. Actually, I'm going to share it right now in the comment section as well, in case anyone would like to have a look at it now. I'm just going to put it right now there so everyone can see. As Jennifer was mentioning, the next training is on December the 14th until the 16th. And it will be, as you mentioned, 2 days of training. And then the third day will be the certification exam. Yeah. And this is online, correct? I have someone asking.
It's online. It's remote. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So they were asking, okay, so someone was asking if they are located in Canada, can they take it?
Of course, it's international. We deal with clients all over the world. So absolutely. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So I hope that answered your question. Let me have a look. They haven't replied anything else. You got a few compliments here with smiley faces as well. So I don't want to take too much of your time for now. I've shared the link as well of the training that Jennifer was mentioning about. Oh, I have here a question. Oh, hi, Debbie, actually. It says, what are the prerequisites for the UXUB certifications, years of experience?
Okay. So there are no prerequisites for taking the certification exam, which is interesting. So, and it really depends, because you could have been working in the industry for 10 years, but not perhaps following a process similar to what they're promoting. So there are no prerequisites. You might have been working only 6 months, but you might have a really strong process that you've been following. If you go to the UXQB webpage, just do a search for the UXQB. They have test questions there that you can take. I believe there's maybe 40 of them. And so I would suggest that if you went there and you took those questions, if you get 70% of them right, then you could pass the test without any other preparation. But what I typically find is that people need to understand the terminology. A lot of times it's different than maybe you're doing everything correctly, but you use different terms. So it helps to use their prep material. You can go and they'll provide prep material right off the website. Or if you feel more comfortable working with a group of people, We do have a prep class. We do flashcards. We do questions, test questions. It's a little bit more interactive, but no prerequisite whatsoever.
Lovely. You also got another one here, so it's good presentation.
Oh, good.
So yes, I think those are all the questions for today. Thank you once again, Jennifer, for joining us, and hopefully we can have you once again soon. We had also some people asking a few more, I would say, more technical questions in some of the groups. So I can maybe pass them on your email address as well.
Absolutely.
They can ask some different things, and maybe you can help them out, or maybe they might be interested in taking the training course based on what I could see. But thank you so much for watching, and take care. Have a very good day, and stay tuned, and hopefully we can have you again.
Yes, take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.